Oh, hey, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, everybody. It's a whole show of your letters to me. I'm Sheila Gunn Reid, and you're watching The Gun Show.
This free episode of The Gun Show is brought to you by
Episodes here for Rebel News. You know, our company is growing quickly, and we'd actually like for your company to grow too. That's why this ad space that I'm speaking through right now is actually available for you to purchase. So instead of people listening to me, they could actually be learning about your company, learning about your business. If this interests you, if this is an opportunity you'd like to capitalize on, send us an email at ads@rebelnews.com.
I think this might be my favorite show of the year. And not just because it is probably the last show of the year. I love taking viewer feedback, for better or for worse. You know, for example, last week I got a viewer email that I didn't address on air, but somebody sent their feedback to me and I responded. The feedback was in my interview with Tom Harris from the International Climate Science Coalition Canada last week. The viewer said I wasn't constantly looking at Tom. And there's a reason for that. You may notice that sometimes I look away from the camera, which is right in front of me. And I'll look like down here or over here. And the reason for that is that I work in my home studio. I don't have anybody who helps me with the show except for editing after the fact. I chase my own guests. I do my own recording. I check my own audio levels. I make sure that we're properly connected. And so I act as my own producer. And so sometimes if I'm looking away from my guest, I am indeed always paying attention to them because I have a little earpiece that sits in my ear so that I can hear every little word they're saying. But I am not always looking at them because I'm looking to make sure that my recording isn't just going to hell in a handbasket. Sometimes when the internet connection is a little weak, I will be sort of cautiously looking at other things to make sure that things have not completely fallen apart. So if you are watching and I am with a guest, I am making sure that what my guest is saying is able to be heard by you. And so that's why sometimes I'm looking away. But that I would not have been able to answer that question if I didn't take viewer feedback and welcome viewer feedback, which is why at the end of every show, I give out my email address, Sheila@rebelnews.com. Let me know what you thought about the show because without you, there's no show. We don't rely on a sugar daddy named Justin Trudeau propping us up with other people's money. I mean, if I wanted to live like that, I'd work for the mainstream media, but I don't. I work really for you. You know, I try to do the news for normal people. All that is to say, a couple of weeks ago, we put out a call for your letters to rebels. So the team in the Toronto studio took receipt of your letters, put them in a PDF, emailed them to me. I printed them out, didn't look at them. So I'm flying blind here. I gave the PDF printout to my teenage daughters who snipped them up and then put them in a stocking and put them on my desk. So I'm going to just pull them out and read your letters to me. So I don't know. Let's get to it, shall we? Again, like I said, I'm flying blind. I'm reading these as you're reading them. Okay, the first letter to Sheila comes from Daryl Burt Elliott. 3 first names. You know who else has 3 first names? Serial killers. Now, I'm not saying that you're a serial killer. I just noticed that. Anyways, Daryl Burt Elliott says, I've watched Rebel News for some time now, and you don't seem to enter the fray on what Trudeau and his henchmen are doing to oil and gas in Western Canada, more specific to Alberta and Saskatchewan. Why is that? Daryl Burt Elliott, sorry. Are you a regular viewer of the show? I'm not sure that you are. One of my beats at Rebel News is the destruction of the oil and gas sector, particularly in the West, at the hands of Justin Trudeau, but also globalist progressives all around the world. And for a time, for dark years, at the hands of our own Premier, Rachel Notley. I talk about the impact on the carbon tax, on industry, on agriculture. I documented the NDP's and the Liberals' attacks on Alberta in 2 separate books, one called The Destroyers and the next one called Stop Notley. My husband works in oil and gas. Actually, all the men in my family work in oil and gas, including my 20-something son. So not only do I report and care deeply about this issue, but it is personal to me. I'm a child of the oil patch. And so I don't take this criticism to heart, because if you watch me regularly, you know that that is one of the most important topics to me is oil and gas in Western Canada, because it is a way out for so many people out of generational poverty. This is an industry where you can make $100,000 a year plus living without having to go to university, without having to be a Laurentian elite, which is one of the reasons why the Liberals hate it so much, is because we can all of a sudden, us rubes and hicks with high school level education, with some hard work and good choices, we can all of a sudden be in their fancy socioeconomic class. They don't like it. They look down their noses at the oil patch out of classism in part. So anyway, I advise you to watch a little bit more of my work here at Rebel News. I have, people from Friends of Science on, Tom Harris from International Climate Science Coalition, Chris Sims from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. I talk about the war on oil and gas all the time, because it is not actually about the war on oil and gas. It's actually not about oil and gas at all. It's about the war on the West, on Alberta. They take away our economic engine. They take away our power in Confederation, and they try to shove us back in our place. And so, anyway, thanks for the letter. I hope you find some of the other work that I do here at Rebel News. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Okay, next letter. It's from Esther Seward. I hope I'm saying that right, Esther. I'm sorry. Why is it the Greenies never breathe a word about all the sewage that is being dumped in the oceans all around the world? Ocean warming. That's one of the reasons they don't want me to have plastic straws, right? Because they're worried my plastic straw out here in the backwoods of northeastern Alberta is going to somehow end up the nose of a sea turtle. But Esther, they never talk about the sewage being dumped off the coast of British Columbia, the raw, untreated sewage that gives people from time to time a serious outbreak of norovirus from eating the shellfish that is farmed in the same area as these outflows of effluent, they call it. They also don't talk about how in Quebec, they constantly have sewage outflows into ecologically vulnerable areas where, it causes massive fish kills, and where baby belugas just go swimming next to, toilet paper and tampon applicators. I mean, it's really horrific that these are also simultaneously the people blocking state-of-the-art, heavily monitored pipelines, like British Columbia Greenies and Quebec lefties. They're the ones blocking the state-of-the-art pipeline while they are still dealing with medieval levels of sewage infrastructure. Just a bunch of hypocrites. But further to my point from before, it's not really about environmentalism, is it? If it were, they would behave as though there was some sort of environmental existential crisis. They don't. It's about smacking down the West and making sure we don't gain our rightful place of power within Confederation and within the world. Next question. That was I'm happy to go back to some of my earlier reporting on the sewage dumps in Quebec. Literally, they would dump billions of liters of sewage at the same time blocking Energy East and the fish would just wash up on the shore dead. And if a pipeline killed that many fish, the level of green outrage would cause global warming. I think just their fiery rage would warm the degrees of the earth a little bit. Okay, next one. Got one from Diane Vroom. Through the year, Rebel gives many accounts of what they've done, hope to do, and issues they are being challenged with and dealing with. Is it possible at the end of the year to give a detailed report as to the many petitions that we have signed and what the outcome has been on each one, if any? That's a really good project, which I believe will probably fall directly on my shoulders. But we have had some good outcomes with some of our petitions. For example, one of my earliest petitions here at Rebel News was getting Canadian beef back on the menu at Earl's restaurants. They did this like crazy thing where they wanted beef that was ethically sourced. Nothing is more ethical than Canadian farmers. Like it's crazy to say otherwise. Anyway, you guys signed the petition. I went all the way to Vancouver to the Earl's head office, delivered the petition, made a big stink about it, as we do on certain topics here at Rebel News. And they actually brought Canadian beef back on their menu. And I was one of my proudest achievements at Rebel News because I felt uniquely poised to fight this battle. As a journalist, as an activist, and as a Canadian farmer who knows a little something about beef. And I'm a beef evangelist. I got to tell you, I am, for people who know, I mostly eat carnivore. I eat so much beef. It's wonderful. I think cows are a magical creature that, outside of being created in the image of the divine, cows, I think, might be what make us human beings, because of their ability to take the things we can't eat and turn them into the things that we can. And by getting so much of our sustenance from cattle, it actually helped to grow our brains and shrink our digestive tract, because your body can only, you have a finite amount of energy in your body. Now you can focus it on digestion or you can focus it on brain growth. So that when we started eating cows, ruminants largely, but cows, milk and dairy, and we started herding cows, our brains grew, our bodies shrunk. And so that's why we don't look like gorillas, right? So anyways, all that is to say, I delivered that petition, and the lady who worked at Earl's accused me of working for Cargill. Like, she thought I worked for the meatpacking industry because she couldn't understand how this journalist knew so much about abattoirs and the meat processing industry. I'm a farmer. And it's one of those times it served me well not being a classically trained journalist. But getting back to your point, Diane, I think that's great. But even if there is no outcome on any of our petitions, I should give you at least a tabulation of how many of them were delivered. And sometimes the success is simply in the delivery. Going somewhere, as I recently did in Saskatchewan with our no class or stop classroom grooming petition, I dropped off thousands of names of Canadians who are calling on the Saskatchewan government to carry on, to not listen to the activists, and to root out gender theory and gender confusion from the classroom. And so sometimes the petitions act as a moral support for the good guys who are under fire from, the mainstream media and the activist left, but I might be repeating myself there by distinguishing between those two groups. I think they're largely the same. So sometimes it's moral support for the good guys, and sometimes it's a reminder to the bad guys that they need to behave themselves, a la Nilly Kaplan Mirth. I went and delivered a petition to her. And I don't know if any of you saw that, but she got right off the rev limiter, as they say on the prairies, from me, because it was the first time that she was calmly confronted by opposition to her out of control behavior. And it called on her to resign or be fired for censoring parents in person. And she tried to do it to me. She slammed a door in my face, but I was intent to give a voice to all the people that she had silenced after she cut the mic to parents who were speaking at a school board meeting. She can't cut my mic. And so, sometimes petitions change things, as is the case with Earls. Sometimes they offer moral support to the good guys to keep fighting. And sometimes they just allow Canadians to have a voice that was taken from them. And so I think those are all three very important things. Equally important, I think. Anyways, that's a great idea, Diane. And I really should at least say, like, this is us delivering this petition. This is us delivering another one. This is us delivering another one. It's very gratifying to deliver those petitions. I take it very seriously because you've trusted me with your names. Like, you've put your name to a cause and then you've given that name to me. I've got to do something with it. It's very important. Orville Grimolowski, hope I said that right, asks me, how come the Calgary mayor really refused to attend Hanukkah, the menorah lighting? Yes, Jody Gondik. I think her non-attendance is what made it political. Yeah, it wasn't political. It's never been political in 35 years, despite many, many wars. But Jody Gondik refusing to attend the Hanukkah celebrations because of a pro-Israel bent at the Hanukkah celebrations. Well, of course it would be a pro-Israel bent. It's the first Hanukkah after the October 7th terror attacks that left 1,200 dead and 240 kidnapped. It's kind of a big thing. She should have been in attendance. She wasn't. Why? Because the pro-Hamas contingent, the anti-Israel contingent in Calgary is much larger than the feisty pro-Israel contingent, or rather the I think it's the Jewish community is in Calgary is a lot smaller than these, I don't know, the Hitler youth marches that seem to be going on the streets of Calgary. And so for her, it's just a purely cynical numbers game. She could not do the right thing and support the Jewish community in Calgary during Hanukkah. For her, she's just looking at sheer vote numbers. I think that's the real reason. I think she's just a shameless opportunist, and she saw opportunity there. Next one. This one is from Elizabeth Noble. Last year, we heard the very sad story about Sheila Annette Lewis. Sheila Annette Lewis is a woman whose story was covered very closely by our Sydney Fizzard. She was a transplant patient here in Alberta who was denied a transplant because of her vaccination status, and she ultimately died. Has the rules of getting an organ transplant changed, or are there still others being denied organ transplants because of their vaccination status? Thank you for your great news. I think the death of Sheila Annette Lewis shook this government. I really do, here in Alberta. Now, Danielle Smith has been very anti-discrimination based on vaccination status, but she was remiss to weigh in on what the doctors were saying was the decision between medical professionals about whether or not Annette Lewis gets to live. Now, I think her passing and the doctors not budging on giving her an organ or allocating an organ to her because of her vaccination status prompted something that our Premier Danielle Smith said, as I'm recording this on the 19th, just so you guys know. But yesterday she said on the Sean Newman podcast, Danielle Smith did, that she would be including vaccination status in the Alberta Bill of Rights as a protected class, something you could not discriminate against people because of. And I think it might have something to do with the passing of Sheila Annette Lewis, because she did face discrimination because of her vaccination status, and it's completely unwarranted. This woman is dead, and it's just a absolute tragedy that nobody can undo, but hopefully it never happens to anybody else. That's all we can do now. Great question, though. Thank you. This one is from Maria, who doesn't give me her last name. How is Rebel News going to deal with the World Economic Forum and its new world order in 2024? I appreciate your consideration on this matter. Best wishes. Well, you know what? The World Economic Forum likes to operate largely in anonymity, or at least in praise. So they don't like to accredit prickly skeptics of what they do. They're like the United Nations, right? Don't accredit skeptics to come to their events, and then they pat themselves on their back for the glowing coverage of journalists they hand selected, and they say like, whoa, look, everybody likes us. Yeah, because you only let the people in who like you. And as you saw from our previous coverage of the World Economic Forum in Davos, the mainstream media outlets have their own pavilions. So not only are they reporting, they are exhibitors. They are active contributors in the World Economic Forum. So, how can you report on something that you have a vested interest in that way? How can you trust that reporting? Especially when they don't divulge that bias. Like, I will tell you, if I'm reporting on things about farming or oil and gas, I'm a farmer. My husband, my son works in oil and gas. Like when I talk about the problems in the education system, I'm a mom with 2 kids still in high school. When I talk about women's sports, I always tell you, like, look, I have a high-level female athlete daughter, so you at least know where I'm coming from. These journalists don't divulge that. I don't know if it's a conflict of interest. It really is, but at least we could call it a bias, and they don't divulge it. So, what are we going to do to deal with the World Economic Forum? We're going to expose them at every step of the way, and we will not capitulate to their demands on us. We will fight. We'll fight, and we will shine the disinfectant of sunlight on all the dark recesses of the corners of the World Economic Forum. That's all we can do.
This free episode of The Gun Show is brought to you by
my mug. I know. It's pretty cool. So is this hoodie I got on, and you could have it on too if you check out our special website at rebelnewsstore.com. That's where you can see Freedom Focus hoodies that we have for you, beanies, cell phone cases, you name it, all while supporting our journalism, where we fight to bring you the other side of the story, as opposed to, being forced by the Trudeau government to fund leftist media out of your taxes. The truth is, without you and your generosity, there is no Rebel News. So again, if you like the reports that we bring you and that we also fight for freedoms in Canada, please consider doing some shopping, picking up some swag at rebelnewsstore.com. We appreciate your support.
All right, another one. Kim Morton says, this is a story suggestion. I would like to see an investigation into federal laws that only impact West and rural areas. Decades ago, there was or is a federal tax on marine fuel that only applied to the West Coast. This reminds me of, I can look into this for you. Thank you for the story suggestion, but this reminds me of the wheat board. For those of you in the rest of the country who don't know, or maybe you're a lot younger than me, you have to be a woman of a certain vintage to remember this. But there was, for a time, export laws in this country that only applied to grain producers in the West. So if you were in Ontario and Quebec and you were a grain producer there's not a lot of them, you could sell your grain to whomever you wanted. But Western farmers, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, we had to sell ours to a specific export agency run by the government, and then the government would then market our grain. Now, whether or not you were getting a higher value in doing that, sometimes you did, sometimes you didn't, but that's not the government's job, right? Like, it's not the government's job. And it was this disproportionate paternalism directed at Western farmers, that we weren't smart enough to sell our own wheat, or that we weren't able to decide what to do with the fruits of our own labor. We needed Big Daddy government to do it for us. And so what happened was some farmers for justice, they were called, decided to break the law in an act of peaceful civil disobedience and succumb themselves to the punishment to make some change. And one of those was Jim Ness, and another one was a former Wildrose MLA here in Alberta, Rick Strankman, among others. But these two men were pardoned by Stephen Harper for their act of civil disobedience. They went to jail. They were cellmates. They sold, I think it was a bushel of wheat, if I recall the story correctly, to a 4-H club in Montana. And they went to jail for it. They went to jail for doing that which an Ontario farmer could do any day of the week. And I think the horrors of seeing those men taken away in handcuffs in front of their crying wives and frightened children, it was an optic that changed everything. It was just, you could really see the injustice of it all. And at the time, our Premier, Ralph Klein, he did attend those rallies in support of the farmers, even though they were breaking the law. I suppose, like the restaurateurs who opened in defiance of the lockdowns, they did it for change. And so, yeah, there is as you say, Maria, there's a history of these disproportionate laws. I mean, for example, happening right now, no carbon tax on home heating oil if you're in Atlantic Canada, but it's on my natural gas here in Alberta. So that's the unequal application of a law right now. Happens all the time. Let's keep going. Thank you for allowing me to take us all down that big fat walk down memory lane. This one is from Glenn McPherson, who asks me, why is this not emphasized? Canada's world emissions are less than 2%. There's nothing Canada could do that could make a difference. Of course not. Canada's boreal forests absorb more CO2 than it emits. None of the environmental calamities that have occurred, ice age, rising sea levels, global warming, climate change due to CO2, now methane. Why do we suffer from these fools? Yeah, there's a reason why, like, geologists and geophysicists are not often subscribers to the theory of catastrophic global warming. It's because these people know that there have been times of higher CO2 levels in our atmosphere, which led to global greening and larger plants, like more biodiversity, larger plants, which fed larger animals, which could sustain larger animals. And there was a great deal of biodiversity on the face of the earth when our CO2 levels were higher. And as a farmer, I've got a real tough time taking advice from people who never get their Birkenstocks off the pavement, telling me that I don't care about the environment, which I depend on for my livelihood, simply because I don't believe that giving money to the government will make the weather colder, and that if I eat fewer steaks, there will be fewer tornadoes. That seems like superstition to me, quite frankly. Keith Black writes, hello, Sheila. Just read an article regarding illegal immigrants that are coming to the U.S. receiving a cell phone, a plane ticket to anywhere they want within the country, and a $5,000 gift card. Oh, they should come to Canada. They're not getting enough. I would guess Canada is even more generous to these mostly young fighting age men. Any info? Yeah. A few years ago, I did a story about how the average Syrian refugee family, and family can be, as I found out in other access to information reporting, a family could be like two, as you say, fighting age men. They just show up at a refugee or immigration intake facility somewhere in the region. Lebanon, I think, is the one that I found, and say, yeah, we're dudes, we're a family, just take us. Are you brothers? Yeah, sure. Do you have any paperwork? I don't know, maybe. And at the time, ISIS had taken control of like passport printing information in northern Iraq and Syria. So even if they had paperwork, you couldn't really trust it. But $50,000 is what these people were getting upon coming to Canada. So yeah, it seems like a lot that they're getting from the United States, but it's far less than what we give refugees. Jamie Nash writes, so where does the gun come from? And yes, you rock. Well, Gunn is my family name. I guess technically speaking, it came from my dad. And I just kept it. I didn't hyphenate it. Just proud of where I come from. And so I just kept to my last name. Also, if you must know, when I had my son, as many of you know, I was quite young, was married. So I've done it the wrong way and then I did it the right way. So let me just tell you, I recommend the right way. It's a lot easier for you and for the child. But I had finally trained the school that my son and I had different last names. And then so when my daughters came along, I didn't want it. It was just very confusing to retrain everybody. So that's my family name now. It's Gunn Reid. Thank you for asking. Nicholas Casper. Also, by the way, if your last name was Gunn, would you change it? It's like the coolest last name ever. And I say that with some level of bias, but it's pretty cool, right? So anyway, Nicholas Casper. The mischief trial in Ottawa is similar to the January 6th prosecution in Washington. Can you describe the cost of the mischief trial to Canadian taxpayers? I would propose it's in the millions. For nonviolent mischief charges against Tamara Leach and Chris Barber, leaders of the Freedom Convoy, who have not done anything even approaching what the anti-Israel marches are doing in the streets every single week. I mean, those people have mobbed MPs' offices, calls for genocide. I saw a fire pit at Randy Boissonneau's office while I was out and about last night as the anti-Israel people were protesting him. So, and as you know, the fire pits. Oh, the fire pits. That was like insurrectionist, according to boring people and worry warts in the city of Ottawa. You know, they have their own horn honking, these folks, their own convoys. They block railway tracks, critical infrastructure. But do you think we're going to see multi-million-dollar prosecutions of those folks? Nope. Lucky if we see any charges. But yes, Tamara Leach, Chris Barber, nonviolent mischief charges, for which if they were convicted of all of them and sentenced to, I think, close to the maximum, or at least the sentence to the standard, they would never see the inside of a jail cell. I mean, Tamara spent close to 50 days in jail already. I mean, they should have just dropped these charges. I think the Crown probably wanted to drop them. This new Crown prosecutor, there's a previous Crown prosecutor who is a real ideologue. He's the one who argued to keep Tamara in jail on a breach of bail conditions that never actually happened. Anyway, I think this new Crown is stuck with like a sack of garbage of a prosecution, can't back out of it. And yes, at the end of the day, it's Tamara Leach and Chris Barber. Their lives are completely disrupted and taxpayers are on the hook for it. So even if she is convicted, it'll be an absolute nothing burger. They'll say, okay, time served, off you go. But the moral of the story is the deterrent, right? You better not stand up to the Liberals if you don't want to end up like her and him. Shelley Franchuk. Hi, Sheila. You are my most favorite news reporter on TV ever. Well, thank you. I hope you voted for me in the Viewers' Choice Awards. I finished 4th. But I did win last year. And as you know, I oversee the journalistic team here at Rebel News. So when they win, I win. So I want them to do well. So, like when the journalists when you like our journalists and we're all like very close to finishing first within like a few hundred votes across a couple of different continents of winning, I like that. It means that we are giving you viewers a stable of journalists that you like. Anyways, sorry, I won't be quiet. I'll keep going. I was wondering what you did before joining Rebel News and how did you get started in the business? Merry Christmas to everyone at Rebel News, and you really are rock stars. Well, I was at home with my kids for close to 10 years. And I think that's the most important thing that I did. And it was one of the things that made me feel good about starting at Rebel News was that Ezra was like, you work from home. You only give me what you feel comfortable giving to the company because your first job is your children. And my husband works in the oil patch, as I said repeatedly on this show for some reason, but he's gone all the time, like gone. He doesn't work on a drilling rig. So it's not like 2 weeks on, 1 week off. He's gone. And so I have a farm and kids. My kids were a lot younger then because I've been here like 8.5 years. And so my youngest was quite little. She wasn't in school full time when Ezra first asked me to work for the company. And so that's what I did before. I did an interview with Andrew Lawton over at True North, which will air over the Christmas break, where you can hear like my full story of how I came to Rebel News. But I was just a bit of a hell-raising citizen activist on the internet, and I was digging down into Justin Trudeau's Liberals in 2015. So Rachel Notley had just been elected in Alberta in like a cacophony of errors that the conservative movement committed, I should say, here in Alberta. And so she had like these crazy, useless paper candidate radicals. They just put their name on a ballot and they won. And the Liberals were doing much the same. Stephen Harper had probably worn out his welcome a little bit. Still a great prime minister, slow and steady. But Canadians wanted change, and the Liberals were running some very radical candidates. And I had seen radicals get elected in Alberta, and the mainstream media had not done their job in properly vetting these people. They were all worried about presumed misogyny of the PC leader here in Alberta telling Albertans to look in the mirror. They're like, it's misogyny or whatever, the usual. And so I started digging down on the Liberal candidates, and I got one nuked. The candidate in Nose Hill, Ala Basreba. The Liberals had to get rid of her for the things that I had uncovered her saying. And Ezra reached out to me online, I think, and he said, what you're doing is actual journalism that the mainstream media should be doing. Why don't you come work for me and do it? And I said, I can't. I think this was in August of 2015. And I said, I can't. Actually, my youngest is not in school full time, and just not the deal my family signed up for. I said I would stay home with my kids at least until they were in school and then reconsider. And so I said no and continued to do like just taking it to the Liberals on Twitter. And then September rolled around and Ezra talked to me again and he said, I know your excuse just started school full time. So sorry, you can't say no. And that was 8.5 years ago. And it's been wild, like a stay-at-home mom from Alberta. I just think about the places that I've gone and done and all these opportunities. Like I've written 3 books. I've traveled around the world. I've held the most powerful people, not just in the country, but sometimes in the world to account. And the fact that I'm not a classically trained journalist is not held against me. It is, I think, at Rebel News, like check in the pro box as opposed to a con, in that I see things with dinner table common sense. Like I'm a mom, I'm a farmer. I see the world through a practical lens, unlike the J school graduates from elsewhere on the planet. Okay, I better speed up. I've been at this 38 minutes and someone's got to edit this video. So I better just quit talking. Gail Quinney writes, we've been following you for years and would like to see you write a pickle recipe cookbook. For those of you who don't know, besides being a meat evangelist, I am I would say a pickle expert. Is there such thing as a pickle sommelier? I might be that. Anything dill, don't give me a sweet pickle, I'll call the police. But anything dill, yes. I think I did 16 or 18 dozen jars of pickles this year, thanks to my friends up at the Scotford Colony supplying me with enough cucumbers to make that happen. I could write a pickle cookbook, but the basis for most of my pickle recipes are my great grandmother's pickle recipe, which you will find, but you won't know who she is, in the Josephburg United Church Ladies Cookbook. I think the last publication was in the 80s. The recipes date back much earlier, but if you can find that book, you will find my great grandma's pickle recipe in there. But yes, I really should. I could do pickle review videos, because people will text me. Like my friends will text me and ask me, like they'll see a pickle on the shelf and they're like, hey, have you tried this? And I'll say, yep, definitely hard pass, or great aroma, good bite, So yes, I should do that. I could. Lucky Lewis writes, why are rural Albertans so well grounded as opposed to our Redmonton and now Calgary people? Thank God for us country hicks. LOL. PS. The best day of my life was discovering Rebel News. Keep fighting for freedom. Merry Christmas. You know what? I heard on the Glenn Beck show once, and it was years ago, but he was talking about rural America. It's considered flyover country, right? New York, LA, flyover, ignore those people in the middle, but they are really the people who make the world go round. And I would say the same thing about rural Albertans. We are the people who grow your food, produce your energy, and we're the useful people, right? And like farmers and people who rely on the weather, whether they want to believe it or not, they are actually deeply religious people, right? You realize that you are at the whims of the creator every day. And so that keeps you grounded. You know where you are in the circle of life. You know your place, right? Like, you are important, because without you, people starve or freeze, but also without the cooperation of God, you cannot do what you need to do to help other people. I think that's it, probably. We also come from having an existential crisis of the weather potentially killing you or an animal killing you. And you have to be self-reliant. You have to be self-reliant on your neighbor, right? Because town is so far away and the police are so far away. So we just think about each other differently. I think that's why the resistance to the COVID lockdowns also came from small town Alberta. Government tell us to stay away from our neighbors. The hell we are. Anyways, let's keep going. Linda Morehouse. Hi, Sheila. You guys went over to the UN and delivered a stack of paperwork of all the crimes JT has done. Whatever happened to that? I heard he was going to get charged with crimes against humanity if he ever went to Europe. I don't think that's true. However, I did go with lawyer Sarah Miller, and we delivered a human rights complaint to the United Nations in Geneva. It was a heck of a whirlwind trip. We were in, I think I was up for 50 hours straight flying there. Sarah was sick. Flying there, we got into our hotel room, we cleaned up, went down, delivered the thing to the United Nations. Sarah is one of the best lawyers in the country. I think she's an incredible human rights litigator. She's worked so hard for the pastors and protesters. And so she went with me, and then we delivered it, and then I came right back. So I went to Geneva, saw nothing, and came right back. Actually, that's not true. I got up very early in the morning the next day before my flight and ran around old Geneva just to say that I had seen it. But now we wait on the United Nations. Who knows? Sometimes it can take years before they act on things. They may not act at all. But sometimes the United Nations is critical of Justin Trudeau. So we just wait. But on the flip side, much like the petitions, what else can we do? Are we just supposed to do nothing? We just say, like, this is our lot in life? Or we try to raise awareness of what is happening in this country. So that's what we tried to do. Do something rather than nothing. And even if your something is ineffective or if it fails, I'd rather go down swinging, wouldn't you? Next one. I have 2 left, I think. Again, apologies, editing team, for this enormously long video. And hopefully the viewers are still with me. Leslie Baynard. My husband and I have followed Rebel for many years, even before COVID. I credit your amazing reporters with keeping us safe and well informed over the last few years. Oh, that's very nice. There is so much going on in the world currently, and it can be very overwhelming knowing what we know. I was wondering if you find it just too much at times. How do you find hope and stay positive? Thank you for all you do. Well, sometimes I get asked this. I try to follow in the footsteps of the late, great Andrew Breitbart. I try my best to be a happy warrior. And I try to, I guess, mock the ridiculousness of it all. Like the devil hates to be mocked. So I'm going to mock him. And if I see what we're experiencing as a society, but as a battle between good and evil, then I am mocking evil. And for me, that is good. And, so I try to make fun of it. It is grueling and it can be hard. And we see people on their very worst day, right? When we are talking with, for example, Sheila Annette Lewis's family, or restaurateurs who are being forced to close, or families who have already lost their jobs because of the pandemic lockdowns, and now they're getting a ticket for gathering for Christmas. You're meeting people on their very, very worst day. And it can be emotionally hard, because I think everybody at this company cares about people, like normal people. That's why we do what we do. We feel like we can make a difference for them. And so sometimes you make a difference by measuring something. You measure it, you change it by bringing awareness. But sometimes we get to actually help. Like when I am talking to a family, for example, during the pandemic. And I should tell you, my mom died during the pandemic because of a canceled surgery, not because of COVID. And that was right when we started Fight the Fines, which was Ezra just announcing into the ether that we were going to take 1,000 COVID tickets, which turned into a whole heck of a lot more. And that morphed into the Democracy Fund, a charity that is now representing truckers. So I feel great about that. But for me, I was the person on the other end of the emails in the week after my mom died, answering those people saying, I got a ticket. I can't afford this. This will destroy my family. I might get a divorce. I could lose my house, whatever. And it was a good distraction for me, because I was mad at the government. I was mad at everybody because my mom died from something that was just minor. And I also couldn't see her, and I couldn't have the funeral that she deserved. My family and I were, 10 people in our mega Catholic church of 800 people. I'm mad at my priest for allowing that to happen. I'm still mad at him. Mad that I had to basically cast lots with my friends and family to see who could be there in the church where I was baptized, where my kids were baptized, where I received all my sacraments. I'm still mad about it, as you can obviously tell. But what helped me and what continues to help me today, sorry, that was a long way around, is that I can turn something bad into something good. I get to meet people on their worst day and they feel like all is lost and nobody cares. And I can say to them, maybe I can help. Maybe I can connect you with people who can help you at no cost to you. And I'm going to gather up signatures on a petition of people who care about what you're going through and see what we can do to change. And if nothing changes, at least these people that we're trying to help know that other people care about them on their darkest day. And so for me, that is very rewarding. It is one of the reasons I keep doing this job in spite of censorship, in spite of how much the left and modern feminism, gun grabbers don't like me. It's very rewarding to be able to help people. I didn't realize I was such a empathetic people person. I never thought of myself as that until you get to do a job where you do that every single day. And that's why I keep doing it. But also, I get to advocate for causes that I deeply care about, like persecuted Christians. And of course, you know, I lean into my faith quite a bit. We know that we will be, we will be persecuted. Like, we know we will be. We were promised that. And so, you know, but that doesn't make any difference to me because I'm called to do the right thing. So that's that. Last one. Jerry Purvis. Hi, Sheila. Just before Tucker Carlson was abruptly booted from Fox News, he teased that he was working on a new documentary called Oh Canada, which he referred to as a great country that's slowly turning into a police state. You've already done some excellent documentaries, so is this topic something that might be of interest? Tucker might even be able to provide some input. May all of you have a blessed season and keep up the great work. I don't think Tucker has any input to give us. I know that we had input to give Tucker. But I think his documentary just died when he left Fox News. Now, we have done some, I think, more comprehensive reporting on certain issues. So, you know, he talked about Tucker's documentary would have encompassed the trucker convoy. Now, we've done 2 documentaries on the trucker convoy, which you can see at Rebel News Plus. We've also done a documentary called Church Under Fire, which I'm very proud of, the government persecution of pastors who stood up to the lockdowns. So I think, frankly, I don't want to toot my own horn here, but I think our documentaries are probably more comprehensive because we took more time on each of the issues that Tucker was going to put just into one documentary. And I should tell you, Kian Simone, our head of documentaries, and I are already starting work on our next documentary. Kian is he's well underway on that. And so we're also going to work over the Christmas holiday. We're going to put our heads down and work as much as we can on that next documentary because time is really of the essence on this one. If we want to change something. And I think that's ideally the outcome of, you know, we're measuring something, so we change it. So that's what we're doing next. And it's again, on the horrors of Canada's dark slide into anti-human progressivism without giving too much away. But we'll let you know very soon about what the documentary is going to be on, because as always, I'm going to ask for your help. Because as I said off the top of the show, there's no Rebel News without you, and we can't do the work that we do with regard to these comprehensive documentaries without your support. And so we'll do something very similar as to what we did with Church Under Fire, where we will invite you to help us, and then we'll give you a little something in return. So we'll have perks available where you can support us, and then we'll give you something back. So we'll give you ownership of the documentary, as we have done in the past. And it's Church Under Fire is the previous one. It's available on Rebel News Plus as well. Well, guys, holy moly, I almost talked for an hour straight without stopping to take a drink of coffee or anything. I would just want to, from the bottom of my heart, and I know that sounds cliche, but I really, truly do mean it. Thank you to everybody who watches The Gun Show every single week, who sends me comments, sends me emails, sends me your viewer feedback. I really do appreciate it so much. I appreciate that you folks at home care so much about the work that we do here at Rebel News. I know that the mainstream media is jealous of us because they don't have this army of people cheering for them to succeed every day the way we do here at Rebel News. So just thank you so much from the journalistic team here at Rebel News. Thank you. I don't know what else I can say, but thank you. What a great year we leave behind us as far as the quality of our journalism here at Rebel News. Hopefully we made a difference. Hopefully we helped you feel not as alone or not as crazy as the mainstream media would like you to feel. And thank you to everybody who also works behind the scenes at Rebel News to bring you the show when you want to see it. There's a huge team. You may only see us, but for every one of us, there's 3 and 4 people who are working behind the scenes to make us seem smart, articulate, and to make sure that you can find us wherever you want to see us. So thanks to the Rebel News team. Thanks to my boss for giving me the opportunities that he does. Like I said, I'm a housewife and I've been around the world speaking truth to power and telling stories that matter to me. Because I think if they matter to me, they matter to other normal people of this country. And I appreciate the trust that he has put in us to do that and to allow me to mentor our journalism team so that we can make a difference, to make this country a freer place. It's, as someone once said, it's not just a job, it's a ministry, I think, that we do here at Rebel News. Everybody, thank you so much for just making Rebel News what it is. As we leave 2023 behind us, here's to hopefully a more free 2024. And as always, don't let the government tell you that you've had too much to think.